Hello, welcome to Witty Reacts video. Chat has been bullying me to react to this video just because Grubby did. Well, if Grubby jumped off a cliff, would you jump off a cliff? Yes, of course you would, because it's Grubby. But yes, we are going to compete with Grubby on this one. Man to man, mono to mono, Richard to Manuel. And yeah, we'll have our own little react. I only jest. Grubby's a cool character. I love watching his streams. And I'm sure me and Grubby are going to have very similar thoughts when it comes to the graphics. I don't think we'll disagree with many things, to be quite frank with you. And graphics, certainly the least, because I'm going to just put it out there right now. Standard graphics is obviously the best. But you have to take into account the Reforged did bring in the Reforged campaign and Chronicles of the Second War, so there were some good things that came from it. So you got to take certain things into account here. But anyway, we have a video from the OC Drummer, and I would suggest you check out the video yourself. I'll put it in the video link because obviously I'm just stealing his content by reacting to it. So check that out. I'll link it and all that. And then if you want to see my opinions, then continue the video from this point onwards.
Hi everyone, this is the OC Drummer here, and today I want to showcase a video describing a topic that's been discussed a little bit recently, and it started, I want to say, a couple weeks ago when Grubby put out a potential hypothetical balance patch.
We reacted to that one as well.
Things that he'd like to see change with the game. Might have even been a few months ago. Some radical changes, some more conservative changes. And then more recently, Remo on the Back to Warcraft team also has done a balance patch. And Neo also, on top of that, has addressed some of the rumors of a patch incoming from Blizzard themselves, confirmed by Mikey Barra on his personal Twitch stream.
Footprints for the skink.
Furthermore, something Neo brought up recently in a Back to Warcraft podcast was the potential removal, the rumored removal of Reforged Graphics. Now, I want to dive deeper into that because I think there's a middle ground solution that could be met instead that could have both the custom community, the custom game community,
that's you guys,
very happy because they love Reforged assets. There's a lot of new models to use in terms of you don't see this on the ladder maps, but there are thousands, potentially at least hundreds of models rebuilt from the ground up that are incredible to use in a custom game environment. But
yes,
in a melee ladder environment, not so great.
I've got him maxed.
We'll go into that a little bit here, but a lot of the reasons that the Reforged models haven't been great is being able to decipher which units are which in the heat of a battle. So something not a lot of players know, even though there were some forum posts about it and some activity on it in Hive Workshop, is back in 2015, Blizzard themselves actually made HD versions of the Warcraft 3 assets and made them available in the StarCraft 2 map editor. And I'm looking at the Warcraft map editor now, but we'll actually go into the StarCraft editor here, and we'll take
I remember
a look
looking at that stuff years ago now. Crazy how long ago that was. Yeah, those look really good.
Pretty good. Now, in the StarCraft context, in the StarCraft engine, things are a bit different, and it's a little disingenuous to see what these models would look like in the Warcraft engine in this environment because the lighting's different. Some of the ways the particle effects are slightly different as well. The textures look differently with the lighting engine capabilities of the StarCraft engine. But what you can see here is the models themselves look pretty good. You know it's a Warden, you know it's a Priestess, a Keeper, and a Demon Hunter. And you go down to the human models, and these models also look great. Archmage, Blood Mage, Mountain King, Paladin. So all of these models in themselves, in their own rights, look
Love the
great.
Mountain King.
They're very easily distinguished from one another, whereas that's one of the pitfalls of the Reforged models. Looking at some of the Orc heroes, these models continue to look good and keep the fidelity and the uniqueness and kind of style.
The silhouette, really.
Of the original models.
They're very similar.
We'll look at those in a little bit more detail in the Warcraft engine as well, and here's some of the undead. And you can also look at
it basically is those models.
The gameplay point of view.
They have the same shape.
You get some of the similar perspective of what you would see in a ladder match. Units look pretty good. It's not like Reforged, where it's very jarring, very different. And the same can be said when looking at these models in the Warcraft 3 engine itself. And this was made possible via some posts this year.
I think the UFA one is probably one of the weaker ones out of all of them as well.
Individuals who I'll credit later, I unfortunately forget some of their names, they ported the models out of the StarCraft engine and into the Warcraft engine using Blender and a couple other methodologies to actually make this possible. So what I've done is took those models and ported them into the Warcraft engine using the asset manager here and following some of the tutorials on Hive Workshop. So in here you can see the Paladin, what it would actually look like in the Warcraft engine. Same here with the Crypt Lord and the Beetles. Standard definition on the left.
Crypt Lord's so similar though, but just sharp.
Is kind of what it's being called Classic Plus on the right. Preserves the fidelity. The colors are bright.
Yeah, it looks nice, doesn't it? I'm trying to think. I can't really complain too much with that one. That's basically probably because it's the closest one to the left. I still kind of do prefer, like, I'll be honest, I'm with you a bit, PR. Strangely enough, even though you can see this is like lower textures, you know, lower quality, it's like 480p versus 1080p or something like that. I think the bulkiness of the left one, because this looks more rounded and sort of perfected in that sense, like the original bulky Warcraft 3 feel of the units is very important to how the game is. I still lean towards that. If you could take that and just sharpen up the textures so it doesn't have to be a different model. Do you see what I mean? Because technically, that's the closest I think you can get. But it's still a different model. If you just get that and sharpen up all of the textures so it's still exactly the same model, that is what I would deem perfect. I would just want standard graphics sharper. I wouldn't want models that are based off standard graphics but sharper, but technically they're different because they're slightly off in certain places. The shaping isn't exactly the same. This is a really good compromise. This is still miles better than Reforged, though. That's the point. This is like infinitely better than Reforged, because the Reforged ones are just like really bizarre. Like it's made for a different game practically. But in my personal opinion, I would love to just go as true to the original graphics as possible in terms of their skeletons, their frames, everything. Just make the textures sharper. That's all you need to do, personally, for me.
Vibrant, they pop. You can easily tell what type of model this is, and this extends onto the Death Knight here. Very similar model, size, ratios all around. He's a little more hunched over.
See, I definitely prefer the left
Same
one.
with the
there.
Lich. Lich looks great in my opinion.
Lich is very similar, so it's
even down
hard
to like kind of the facial expressions.
Complain on that one.
And then the Skeleton Warrior, another
I like the
model,
bulky
that was
shoulder
exported.
pads.
So not every model is available.
On the
I would
right
say
one.
probably only every. I think
The
it's
skeletons
all the
look pretty
heroes
good.
and
I'll give you that.
couple buildings
Because they
and a
look
couple
similar
models.
enough in shape.
But I'd imagine Blizzard went through some sort of pipeline that made this scalable to do, unless they manually went and did all these. But in my opinion, they should have just hired this team to do these art assets for Reforged. So I want to kind of hop in and take a deeper dive and a deeper look at some of this. So I'm going to present this just so it's full screen. So what I want to take a look at here is some examples of the 2015 models. We just looked at some in the editor. Compare them against the Reforged models, kind of see what's going on, why it's so jarring and so difficult, and just, quite frankly, everyone just doesn't like them, especially in the melee and ladder scene.
It's the most.
I would look at some of these.
It's the most diplomatic way you could say it. No one likes them. No one really uses them unless they're forced to do it, basically.
The StarCraft 2 editor, we did that earlier, and the Warcraft 3 editor, and then look at some actual battles in the game, and a couple examples of that, and then to top off where I think the game should go, and maybe where this is a compromise right in the middle of using the Reforged engine with some of the SD Plus models. So you can see here, here's a kind of a static view of all of, or some of the heroes. You can see Dark Ranger at the bottom, also a couple creeps, feral spirits. So these are as viewed in
Look
the
at the
StarCraft
Phoenix.
editor. You can see some of the colors are a little washed out. They don't pop as much as the Warcraft 3 engine. Phoenix is there, Orange Bird, Water Elementals, Avatar Vengeance, everything like that. And also following along with this, you know, Infernals, Archimond model, Fellhound model, shades of different colors. Skeleton Warrior from the top left. Even
green
Frog
Felguard,
Critter.
that's weird.
And some of the doodads, which we'll get a peek at as well. And I think the doodads look quite nice in the standard.
They look more
plus,
like the originals,
as well
yeah.
as, I think, honestly, the Reforged models look great as far as doodads go. And I haven't heard much negativity towards the environment itself. It was always, I think, mostly focused on the models and the performance. So the performance.
But the environment works for a campaign, or maybe even custom campaign, storytelling, narrative. But I don't think Reforged doodads work for multiplayer, melee, competitive gameplay, because they still kind of look jank, to be frank with you. But you can get away with it in a campaign because it's slow paced. You're not rushing around. You don't need that visual information ticking along like immediately. You just absorb it, and whatever it is, it's not going to affect your gameplay much, whereas it does in multiplayer. That's the problem.
Of the game did not perform well. You were lucky to get like 60 frames a second, even on like high-end machines with 3080, 3090 graphic cards. So the models and the engine very clearly not optimized.
I like the flowers
and
there.
also the fidelity and the identification capability, being able to determine which unit is which, and be able to kind of, in the moment, multiple times a second, be able to tell which unit is which and make the right decisions in a battle. So, looking at some of these units, you can kind of see why this is such a problem. You have Classic all the way on the left, Classic Plus, which Blizzard again put out in 2015.
Classic Plus, guys, even bulkier.
Holding up very much to the art style and the direction of the Classic art style. And then you have Reforged on the right, which in a vacuum, in a custom game, looks great, but it's completely different from the Classic and Classic Plus.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, it's just a different game. It's not Warcraft, or it's not like Warcraft 3, put it that way. It's a different game. Like, you can't say that looks bad per se. It looks bad in Warcraft 3.
Design philosophy. And this
Holy
gets amplified.
Shit, look at the tits on the Classic Plus. Wow, that is an improvement.
Even more colors get washed out, gets harder to identify.
She's a Twitch streamer.
Start existing awesome in a vacuum, but not so awesome in the context of a Warcraft 3 game. So you can see Priest of the Moon here. Classic.
The Reforged one, yeah, look at that. It's like a different game again. It's just so different. Like, the model doesn't look bad per se. Like, it's pretty high quality. But it's just not... It doesn't actually look anything like it, does it?
Very close together. The synergy
just a generic unit.
There.
I think, again, that's another thing. A lot of the Reforged ones, just because they don't look true to the original nature of Warcraft 3, the units, including the heroes, just felt generic. They felt like you didn't have a connection to them.
Reforged deviates into some other sort of direction. Illidan, not so bad.
Illidan did better in Reforged. I'll give you that.
What color Illidan is, you can very clearly see it. Even more so in the
like in comparison to the other
Reforged
versions.
The tattoos were also colored, and so was the blindfold.
But I still prefer
the classic
original
version. That's not the case. Reforged, a little bit harder to see here. And the Warden, I think, deviates a lot. So
yes.
Warden deviates a lot from the classic model.
I still remember, I'll still always remember, at least until I lose my memory on that, when we had the news of the Frozen Throne, and you got to see each of the 4 heroes that each race gets. You know, the Blood Mage, the Crypt Lord, the Warden, and the Shadow Hunter. And each one was so unique and so cool. You was excited for each race. It's so unique and cool that, like, the design, wow. Like, that Warden model, just, this is it. Like, people say, you know, women or whatever in video games only wear, like, skimpy outfits and stuff like that. Have you seen the Warden? She's hot.
Classic and Classic Plus, again, very close together. And these are all Blizzard models. Like, these aren't user-generated. These are all from Blizzard. And then we can kind of look at some of the in-game representations of this.
Yeah,
So
too much
standard-
clutter in
standard
it. Look,
plus on the
it's
left,
just
and
too
then
much.
Reforged on the right. You can see the deviation that was taken. Even at the level of the Beatles, there's more spikes, there's more legs. It's just a different art style, different direction. It's much harder to determine and tell at a moment's glance what the unit is. Death Knight, again, although looks pretty good on the right, it's hard to even tell that that's a red Death Knight. And you could really only tell because the camera...
Bear in mind, actually, another point. He mentions the color. In the earlier days of Reforged, they had even less emphasis on the color. That was one of the things I picked up on and I made a big stink about. And I don't know whether they truly did make really any changes. I felt like they did make a few more changes to make characters pop a little bit more for the color that they were representing. Blue, teal, purple, red, whatever it might be. Because when they showed you the models on like Hive, or rather Wowhead, I remember they showed all the models there. Typically, they'd release new data mined models, and you couldn't really see where the red shoulder pads would be, or the red belt buckle. Things to make that color of that race, the player, essentially, stand out.
is pitched downward. When it's up, you don't see the red cape, the red shoulder pads. It's just very little red presence there, where on the left side you could see the Classic Plus very clearly denoting what the unit actually is. Lich, again, very different. Floating tomes.
Looks like he belongs in Diablo 2.
Much higher fidelity. A lot more going on with the wardrobe. Whereas on the left, sticking to the basics. And Paladin, probably the worst offender in the Reforged makeover.
I don't know what they were thinking with that.
I think the SD remake of the Paladin is spot on. There's really not much more you need here. And then they went with the model all the way on the right, the Paladin over here. So some credits before we jump into some of the game. Hive Workshop, of course, continually doing great things on the custom scene, custom models, custom maps, anything you need, textures. Astromin did many of the units, models, and textures, the conversion from the StarCraft 2 engine over to the Warcraft engine. Grenersh did the doodads, which we'll take a look at as well. And Arthas981 appropriately did the Death Knight model and texture. So without further ado, let's jump on into the game. So one of the big complaint points of Reforged models is it's hard to determine...
Looks like Thanos.
Reforged, what type of unit you're actually looking at in a battle. So what I've done here is I've put up against one another undead units of standard definition plus versus standard definition units. So they're going to battle each other. I don't know what this guy's doing down here. Get back up. And unfortunately, some of the trees are missing here. I'm not sure why that is.
That would be overpowered if you had Thanos in Warcraft.
And we're going to battle standard definition units. And you could tell the units really don't get lost. You could kind of tell which units which in the heat of this battle. Standard definition plus versus standard definition
I would
units.
agree with that.
I know where the
I can
Beatles are,
identify
I know where the skeletons are, I know where my heroes
quite
are.
quickly.
The hero glows are there. Everything's pretty prevalent. I don't see any issues.
I'd say the
microwing
blue Death
or
Knight is the
dealing with
weakest.
standard definition plus units.
And the Beetles are a
So
little
basically
bit
what we're saying
off
here
color,
is,
like
I think standard
almost shiny or
definition
something.
plus and standard definition units
The blue ones
can coexist together. And I think this should be an option going forward.
Don't
if
quite
the team
pop,
have decided
right.
that this is what they want to do.
Lich looks a bit
So
gimpy
again,
as
I think
well.
standard definition plus, they both blend in pretty well together. So we're going to quit out of here. And what I'd like to
Rage
do
quit.
now is look at the Reforged version of this and see why the Reforged units are a problem, and then where I think we need to go, where we could go. So we're going to hop into here. We're going to go to Properties. And we're going to flip on Reforged Graphics. And we're going to retest this map.
Yeah, this
So
if
what we're
that
gonna
didn't
see
make
here
your point,
first is Reforged versus Reforged models.
this will
And you'll
definitely make the
kinda
point.
see the visuals get a little muddy. There's a lot more neutral colors, not so much like poppy, vibrant colors. But where I think we'll end up is somewhere you might not expect. So here we have Reforged versus Reforged in the left. And again, I think the doodads, the grass, the mines, this stuff looks pretty good.
This is where Grubby swore, wasn't it?
Now, some might argue that the classic graphics, doodads, and terrain look better and they pop more.
Still look
Sure,
better.
maybe that's true.
Still look better, without a
But I
doubt,
would
classic.
say if I were playing on this map with these doodads and this environment.
This works for a campaign. If I'm walking around, I don't care. I can just enjoy the scenario, the scenery, or whatever. This works way better for a campaign, but not at all for melee.
I'm not really noticing it too much, and it actually looks okay. Another thing I think Reforged does well, but needs a little makeover, is the actual UI. So you'll notice the left side's cut out, so is the right side. You have some nice decoration on the actual HUD, especially for Night Elf. So I think overall this looks pretty good. Now, when in Reforged, when you're battling one another, I think everyone would agree it's a little bit harder. Like, I can't even tell if this is a skeleton
Yeah, it looks
or
blurry
a beetle.
to me.
Like, the skeletons and the beetles almost look the same. It's very hard to tell what is what at a moment's glance.
It does just all blend in, doesn't it?
And I think this is one of the big problem points for the Reforged graphics. Very hard to determine who's who, what is what, and micro-appropriately make the right decisions. I mean, you can see there's a lot of homogenization of what just skeleton warriors and beetles look like. So, as unfortunate as that is,
It could be like a bit of the terrain is sort of impacting. If these were fighting on like just a green screen background or something, they might stand out a bit better. They're still kind of like weirdly blurry though. I don't know how to describe it. But like even the terrain surrounding it kind of just looks like a lump of clay in certain aspects. And that's with like more fidelity and detail. It's just still kind of looks like it's kind of a smudge. Have you ever like done a photo? Well, maybe you haven't, but like a Photoshop or a thumbnail or a picture or something like that, and then you just get the blur tool and you just sort of like stroke the blur tool a couple of times over. That's kind of what it feels like.
There is a solution to this problem, and I think there is a way for Reforged and for Standard Definition Plus to coexist, and I think that is here. So here
Definitely pops more.
is the Standard Definition Plus models inside of the Reforged engine. And this is where I think everybody gets what they want. You have units that pop, units that are meaningful, true to the classic direction, in an engine that is actually futurized. You don't have pixelation around the
So he's trying to go for
selections.
a combo of
Doodads look great. Terrain
classic
looks pretty good.
plus models
And I think when you actually battle,
with
you can
Reforged.
tell who's who again. I know where
environment.
my beetles are. I know where my skeletons are. Animations look great.
I still don't think the environment works.
The icons even got a little bit of a makeover. And yes, you can make the icons look a little bit better, but they're HD now. So I think, at the end, this might be a world where Reforged and classic fidelity can coexist. Now, everyone's going to have their opinion, and there will be the diehard classic fans that only want the classic graphics, and there's no reason to get rid of it. But I think what this suggests is perhaps there is a future where we should allow the Reforged engine or the classic engine, and then Standard Plus or Reforged models to, Standard Plus can be used in both. Standard can only be used in classic. Reforged can only be used in Reforged, but Standard Plus can be used in either one. And I have a feeling, perhaps, in the Reforged engine, if they got things optimized to where they needed to go, Standard Plus and Reforged graphics can coexist. Now, before we go,
I'll let him. Well, I'm just going to say on that point, this is the most complicated issue, and I wasn't sure if I was going to do a separate video on this or not, but I'll give you a little indication into the complicated situation of if you were to redo Warcraft 3, would you even have Reforged graphics? Again, like this would obviously affect the Reforged campaign, Insane Monster, you know, Shadi, who's making Chronicles of the Second War, and his team. Like, they're doing good work with those projects. I've enjoyed playing them. I actually quite like them, obviously. They put a lot more effort into the Reforged aspect than Blizzard ever did. So from that point of view, I definitely enjoy them. But I'm still kind of a die-hard classic player. So if you have this kind of, well, here we kind of have to make an engine that can support people who only want to play classic, who want to play classic versus a Reforged, or classic plus with Reforged background. Like, how are they going to work that? It's way simpler to just basically kind of go hard line in one direction, like just classic. Ideally for the Reforged dudes, you know, like working on their stuff, there would be the option to still have Reforged, but it's tricky because if that came in line with impacting the classic being revitalized, I don't think I would support that, even though I love those guys. I think they're awesome, but it's not up to me. I'm just saying, like, I want their work to be sort of like progressing, and maybe they could somehow transition it to like just classic plus. But how do you do that? How do you have so many different toggles? Yeah, you just have so many different toggles, and there's too many different ways to balance and support. I don't know. It's a real mind screw, that one. That's why I haven't quite worked out whether I'll do a video on it or not. But you can kind of give an idea. If you've got any thoughts or opinions on that, feel free to put them down in the comments, because I'd be interested to see what your thoughts are, so I can maybe sort of have a better perspective on the situation.
Can coexist. Now, before we go, I know that who knows if a patch is coming out. Maybe it will, maybe it will not. But if a patch is coming out, and if people are listening, whether it's on War 3 Champions team, Blizzard team, whoever, these models are available. They're made by Blizzard. They're on Hive Workshop. They're not all done. But Blizzard, if you're out there, you can certainly finish up the work.
Who made those at Blizzard? Was it Samwise or
now to upscale some of the older models as well? And I think combining the best of both worlds, the Reforged engine and what it does well, and the classic art direction, what it does well, could bring a better future for the game in terms of art style and bringing a fresh new coat of paint to the game we all love today. Have a great rest of your day. If you're not already, hit the subscribe button. Follow me on Twitch and Twitter. Subscribe on YouTube, and I'll see you all next time.
There you go. Support the man. That was a good video. Very well made. Gets to the point. I like how it's all structured. So you can find it over here on his channel. Obviously, again, like, just check the video description link and check out his channel over there. Definitely a good video. It is raising a lot of interesting points, though. Where would you stand? Would you just stand classic all the way, or would you compromise for classic SD Plus, where it is those models, not strictly the classic models, but the ones that look very similar to the classic models, but they're sharper? Or are you still on board with Reforged? And how would you sort of deal with Reforged and classic? So classic heroes and units with Reforged backgrounds. Personally, like I said near at the start of the video when I was talking about the Crypt Lord, I would just not even have the classic plus SD plus business. I would just have the original models, the framework, the skeletons, exactly how they are. Just the texture just needs to be updated. That's for me personally. I don't need any extra skeleton frames like shoulder pads or anything like that. That worked on the skeletons fairly well, but I wouldn't need it. I only want purely the classic, really, and just make the detail fidelity of the textures sharper. That's for me personally. I wouldn't want to sacrifice the original models for SD Plus. They do look good, I'll grant them that, and it's very nice, and they're way more true to the original Warcraft 3, but they're still technically a little bit different in some places because they're from the StarCraft 2. There you go. That's my thoughts. What do you think? Let me know. And if you enjoyed the video, thumbs up, subscribe for more cheesy React video content. Take care. Have a good one. It does make you think.